basketball season. Hoosier Hysteria 2013. Inside Indiana overtime. They're from. Not sure how in-depth this is going to be. But we felt like we should do one because it is Hoosier Hysteria. This is basketball, Indiana, blah, blah, blah. Alex McCarthy, Zach Osterman. This is actually probably one of my last.
I know, it's sad.
Inside Indiana overtimes.
Unless we have you on as a guest.
Well, you'll have to.
I don't know.
Have to.
Yeah.
It's an alumnus thing.
Yeah.
Sort of an emeritus position on overtime.
Right.
Anyway,
we'll worry about that when we get to it.
Hoosier Hysteria tonight. I don't know. I mean, Devin Davis wins the dunk contest. Hunter Perea.
I thought
in totality of dunks was better.
Judging on a fuller body
Davis,
of work.
But Davis saved his best for last. Yogi Ferrell wins the three-point shooting contest, which of course I think Indiana fans will find, somewhat encouraging. I counted up. I think he shot 15 to 25 each time. He went twice. He went once in the regular whatever, and then once in the finals. And what was interesting to me about that was that. We've heard Tom Crean talk about how he needs and expects Ferrell to shoot better. They had the general 5 stations set up that they always have. Stations he did not shoot well at the second time through. So it seems like he actually didn't have a very good scrimmage, but in general it does seem like his shots improved. Yeah,
it certainly looks that way, and that was something that I think a lot of people were kind of impatient with Ferrell his freshman year, where. He wasn't asked to shoot.
But he was on a team of shooters, and so when he was shooting 29, 30%, I mean statistically that was well below what he did in high school, but it stood out because
you're playing next to Jordan Holes
and Christian Watford,
these guys who,
and even Victor Oladipo shot like 48%.
Yeah.
So
and so this year obviously without those guys, you're gonna
forgive me.
You're forgiven. There's going to be a little bit more of a burden placed on Ferrell's shoulders in terms of shooting and spreading the floor like that. Even though Tom Crean talked afterward about there's no way that this team's going to be nearly as good from behind the arc. So they're going to this year as they were last year. So they're going to have to find a lot of new ways to score and a lot of new ways to almost run the offense. But yes, it was for IU fans it's a very encouraging sign to see Ferrell shooting a little bit better and really. There's not that much you can really take out of a 3-point contest or something like that. But it's better to see him.
The one thing that it does is it I've always thought it was a little bit underrated in the sense that it forces you to sort of quick fire. You don't get to set yourself. It's a little bit. It does in a way simulate kind of a game because you're just picking the ball up and shooting, picking the ball. You only have a minute. But one way or the other, it's interesting you bring up Crean. Because I think this is really kind of hitting more into maybe the fleshy parts of what we can talk about tonight. He has been, both Wednesday night at his little speech that he usually gives at the auditorium, we call it annual, I think he skipped it 1 year, but other than that. And then tonight, he's being very frank about the weaknesses of this team. He's talked about how the defensive communication, which is, if you can kind of think back to his first 3 years, was a huge problem, is not very good. He says that guys don't really understand the intensity yet. He talked a lot about how early practices have been used more to build, I think, what he called like mental endurance. That they're really not grinding these kids down physically yet because they feel like they got to get them to a place where mentally they're ready for that, and they're not there right now. He talked about the shooting. He talked, I think. He used that to maybe not specifically, but sort of in general, talk a little bit about how the offense is going to be changed. It's going to be different. And we've obviously this is nothing totally unexpected, but it is interesting, a little bit like a politician before a big debate, to see him sort of playing the expectations game and really kind of pouring cold water on expecting too much from this team, especially expecting too much from this team too soon.
Yeah, and it's hard to really generate expectations for this team anyway. You don't know who's going to start outside Ferrell and Sheehy probably. You don't know where the offense is going to come from. Other than Ferrell and Sheehy, it's basically all question marks. At least in my mind, where you don't know how good Jeremy Hollowell's going to be.
Vonleh, you probably.
You probably know what.
Although he's hurt now.
More or less, maybe what you're getting from him, but without him, even seeing him in this scrimmage tonight, it's still hard to kind of picture what that's going to look like. So, So with Crean being very open about kind of what to expect, what to be looking for, that's really helping at least me to kind of generate a little bit of expectations of what to look for, what to expect from this team.
We're glad we could help you out.
Thank you.
We're glad
that's why they're doing this. They did Hoosier
No,
Hysteria.
I mean, it really is interesting, and at the same time, I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. Crean is very bullish about the idea that he expects his team to get some of these things. He expects that length and athleticism will make this a really good defensive team. Maybe by the end of the year, maybe that if you can keep some young legs and minds fresh, that the team you see on December 31st in Champaign-Urbana is not the same team you see on February 23rd, 22nd, 23rd. They haven't quite announced the game, but up in Chicago against Northwestern, up in Evanston against Northwestern. So, I mean, it's going to be really interesting. They obviously don't have that rough and tumble schedule. They've got a pretty easy non-conference schedule, certainly in this building. But it's going to be interesting to see, really, I think, how this team maybe handles some of the... I mean, LIU Brooklyn was in the tournament last year, although they have lost, I think, their best player now for the season. Stony Brook has been, over the last couple of years, a very good low to mid-major program. It's, Evansville's, obviously, you would expect them to kind of come in. I mean, they've lost Colt Ryan, I believe. I believe he's graduated now. If he is not, then they'll still have him. One way or the other, you'd expect them to come in here and give Indiana a decent shot. But the point is, it's going to be interesting to see how this team maybe handles some of those games. As much as, and then I think that the one that I picked out, we did a little thing for the magazine about, the non-conference schedule in general. The one I picked out, the one game I really want to see, just in terms of maybe grading this team, is Notre Dame, because that's a team that probably not in personnel ways, not for all the same reasons, but that's a team that's probably in a somewhat similar position of thinking, right now we feel like a fringe top 25 team. We feel pretty comfortable that we're in the tournament, but we're not sure. And we need to kind of figure some things out, figure out where some pieces fit. And that could wind up being a tough game for Indiana with Zach August, with Jerry Grant, and I believe Eric Atkins is still there. So, I mean, that's going to be a team that could gel by December and be really tough. But this is also a team. I mean, more than anything else, you kind of get the feeling, and Crean has basically said this a couple times, you kind of get the feeling that Indiana just really doesn't know yet what it's that there have been really good moments in practice, there have been some bad moments in practice, that it's obvious that things are going to change. This is a more athletic team, probably, again, a longer team, maybe a quicker team in some situations than a year ago. Devin Davis, by the way, guarded Yogi Ferrell tonight pretty well at the point. But that this also isn't a team that's going to be able to score or rebound the way it did a year ago or 2 years ago. It's not going to be able to space the floor like that. It's not going to be, Crean talks a lot about guard rebounding today because they weren't shooting the ball as well as they used to. I think as much as what he means is guards didn't have space. Guards had a lot more space to get the ball when the floor is spread out with three-point shooters. There are more just open spaces to look for caroms, and grab the ball if you're Victor Oladipo, Yogi Ferrell, someone like that. But more than anything else, I think Crean just still isn't really sure, and this is probably maybe where it's definitely where the extra 2 weeks of practice comes in. He's just not really sure what I think he's got some ideas for what this team's going to look like. It's certainly, obviously, he's got kind of a game plan for how to develop it, but he doesn't know specifically what the product is going to be at tip-off November 8th.
Yeah, you don't. There are a lot of, on an individual level, you don't know exactly what you're getting out of Bray. You don't know exactly what you're getting out of Hollowell or even Gordon or some of these guys, and you don't know what you're getting collectively. There's just very little known, really. I mean, Sheehy, Farrell, some of the other kind of small role player guys, but just from an individual basis, you don't really know exactly what you're getting from guy to guy. He's talked about a lot of guys having good days in practice and having bad days in practice, about guys who are dominant and then the next day just you can hardly tell are there.
Yeah.
And
Perea.
Yeah.
One you mentioned
and that's going to happen, obviously in the first week of practice anyway, but for a lot of guys who were kind of that way last year, it's something that you would really like to see come along in these next few weeks before the exhibition games, before the actual games.
That maybe is one reason why they're playing two. I believe last year, did they play one last year? If they did, they only played one. They're playing 2 this year, and that's probably one reason why. Because, yeah, I mean, you do kind of get this sense. I mean, even if you think about it, and I'm not demeaning Yogi Ferrell or Will Sheehy at all by saying this, but if you think about it, I mean, those are even kind of, they're not role players. But you talked about, I mean, Will Sheehy was your 6th man last year.
Yeah.
He was the best 6th man in the league, probably, pound for pound, and he probably has been the last 2 years. And under a different, in a different situation, he'd have started the last 2 years. But he didn't. I mean, the reality is he didn't. Someone started over him. And as you said, Yogi Ferrell really wasn't expected to do a lot more than just kind of be this facilitating pass-first point guard, in an offense full of scorers. You really, I mean, you have lost. I'd have to go back and look at the stats, but you've lost most of your direct offensive options. Who do we play through on this possession? How often was it Yogi Ferrell or Will Sheehy a year ago? I mean, that's kind of where this thing is right now. And, Yogi Ferrell, the only player to start a game last season that's back on this roster. Will Sheehy, the only other one that's ever started a game.
She started
in college.
one last year, right? There was one game where Watford sat and Sheehy.
That's correct. That's actually true.
Non-con.
That is true. Well, then I've got some correcting to do on a story. But
still, he wasn't a regular.
It's the same idea that, I mean, even what you retain from last year, you still don't retain a lot. And for Indiana, the plus side is it's kind of a down year in the Big Ten. Michigan State certainly looks the class of the conference. Michigan, Ohio State should be up there. Wisconsin is always Wisconsin. Beyond that, I mean, is Indiana good enough to get itself into that kind of top? Basically, beyond that, you've got Indiana, Iowa, Illinois, Purdue. And then below them, you've got Penn State, Minnesota, which is huge rebuild mode right now with Richard Pitino. Northwestern, which you just don't really know what to count on there with Chris Collins. I mean, they're moving from running such a distinct offense to whatever Chris Collins is going to have them do. You don't know what to expect from them. And then Penn State. And, I mean, all respect to Tim Frazier and Pat Chambers, and things do seem to be ticking up in State College, but it's still Penn State, and it's still Big Ten basketball. Yeah. So is Indiana good enough? I mean, it's kind of a weird, you still feel like they're probably going to make the tournament. I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, there's too much talent, there's too much athleticism to not.
And again, the Big Ten's kind of down this year, especially compared to where it was a year ago, where it was so good.
It was so much better than any conference. Yeah.
And is Indiana good enough to be sort of the best of that middle 4? Or are they good enough to sneak into that top 4 or make it kind of a top 5 again, where the idea is more just that maybe Indiana finishes 5th, but they clearly sort of belong in the conversation with these 4 teams rather than these 3. I mean, I don't know if that makes any sense, but just kind of the idea of separating it into tiers and where does Indiana go, even if they are at the bottom of the highest tier, are they in that group or are they in, the sort of the middle group? And it sounds like Tom Crean right now doesn't really know, but he thinks anyway that they're gonna eventually be in that top tier, even again if it's not top 3, at least it's top 5. And again, you distinguish between what Indiana's done and what Purdue's done at the end of the season.
Yeah, and a lot of that is going to be decided. I think someone tweeted tonight, the play of guys like Perea, Hollowell is going to decide whether they're a 4th place team in the Big Ten or whether they're a 7th place team or something like that. Where and again, it comes back to that just uncertainty of that's where the difference is going to be made. It's not going to be what you're getting from Farrell, from Sheehy, and maybe even from Vonleh. But it's those other guys, those, Stan Robinson, Evan Gordon, exact 5th place finish in the Big Ten instead of just kind of.
And it could be a team that, I mean, again, it sounds like Tom Green is at least trying to talk up this possibility that it's a team maybe, from a logistical standpoint with 6 freshmen and 4 sophomores, but who knows. Quick injury update. Troy Williams should be back in practice next week. He's got a hand injury. They've never been specific about that. Noah Vonleh, it basically sounded like he tweaked his ankle in practice. Green said they're going to keep him out through the weekend. He didn't say anything beyond that. I mean, he's been cagey before, but this did sound like it was a pretty sort of basic, just kind of no need to risk him thing. I mean, he's as sure a thing as you got in the freshman class. Crean thought Stan Robinson's knee injury was just a bruise, which is incredibly painful, but those things aren't structural, and although they heal on their own time at some level, that it's not like he tore something. Right. It's not like but that is preliminary. Crean kind of stressed that was just basically Steve Offeld on the training table after, so that could change.
Yeah, but he felt like everything was in place.
Yeah,
That's
nothing was structurally damaged.
Yeah.
And Luke Fisher's still out a few more weeks. So everyone not from the state of Indiana and Indiana's freshman class is hurt right now. This, again, I guess is my first basketball overtime of the year and my last one all my time. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe not. But I think certainly I'm just doing the math in my head, and I think it might be.
I think so.
One way or the other. If it is, we'll do another one at football tomorrow. But this has been a lot of fun. I apologize for the fact that these pictures that came at the beginning of the video are really more of last year. We just don't have a lot of pictures. I mean, they've lost 7 people off last year's team. Forgive me. I think one of them I think I just took with my phone at some point. But either way, forgive us for that. They will be updated eventually. For Alex McCarthy, I'm Zach Osterman. You've been watching Inside Indiana Overtime.
Talk to you tomorrow.